So let's get started with, I guess, some of the questions. And, one of the, I know for myself as CEO of Pure Bookkeeping and mentoring bookkeepers through their journey of building their business and helping them move from hourly to value pricing, that, it's the mindset shift. It's, is several challenges in moving across from into value pricing. So what have you found as, some of the biggest challenges when you're working with accountants and bookkeepers to move across, and what are the, perhaps some of the solutions, or, how to find those solutions?
Excellent question. Yeah, I took the questions you'd sent me, Katrina, and I put together a little PowerPoint deck to answer them. So can I share my screen?
Oh, yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Do I need to give you rights? No, you've got it.
So, and I took your questions. I kind of rearranged the order, but the first one is where I started too. So what are the major challenges people face, or the biggest challenges when implementing this change? And you hit on some of them already. The big ones are, and this is going to vary by firm, obviously. So if you're a solo practitioner, that's not going to matter. But if you've got partners, chances are you're not going to have 100% buy-in from the partners. You're going to end up having to probably convince some partners to make this change. The bigger the firm, the harder that is, which is why this change is mostly started in smaller firms, such as solo bookkeeping firms or solo practitioner accounting firms. That's really where this revolution was born. Then it kind of moved up to the 2-partner, 4-partner, 10-partner. Now we're in the top 100. We're in the big 4. So but it started from the ground up. Just like most revolutions don't happen top down. The other thing, the other challenge that I've really encountered is just pure, inertia. It's so much easier to bill and duck by the hour, right? Just here, sign this engagement letter. We're $100 an hour, and we'll bill you when we're done. And look, that's easy. What I'm preaching takes more time. It takes more time, more creativity, more innovation, more thought up front. You have to have a value conversation with the customer. But I argue that you're going to save a lot of time at the back end chasing down receivables, collection calls, all of the stuff. That all just goes away. Getting rid of timesheets goes away in this model because you're putting more thought up front. But you really got to get over that inertia of, wow, the billable hour is just so much easier. So on this one, I'll just bill by the hour. Now, if you're going to do this, you've got to make a commitment to do it 100%, one customer at a time. Another challenge that I see is obviously value pricing takes more time up front. We already talked about that. People don't have the confidence to have a real value conversation. I think this is a big one. The value conversation is difficult. I think a lot of professionals feel they don't really offer anything of value, so they don't even want to go here. It's just so much easier to dive into the work, the cleanup project, or helping them get the tax authorities off their back, or whatever it might be. The scope of work is much easier to dive into than stepping back and thinking about the scope of value. But with this model, scope of value is absolutely critical, because scope of value drives the scope of work, right? If I went to a contractor and said, build my dream house, he would just kind of look at me and go, well, what does that mean to you? And until he saw blueprints, he wouldn't know what my dream house was. He wouldn't know what kind of building materials, how big of a house, the layout, the fixtures. The scope of value are those architectural plans. You can't build a house without having the plans to know what it's going to look like when it's done. It's the same thing with a customer relationship. You need that scope of work. Our processes internally inside of our firms are all designed around the scope of work, not the scope of value, right? We measure the inputs, we measure the hours, we track the costs, even workflow to some extent, depending on the technology you use, is all more about the capturing the effort, the time, rather than say looking at the turnaround time to the customer like FedEx does. You know, FedEx measures turnaround time because that's what their customers care about. All I care about with FedEx is, does it drop on my doorstep at 8:30 in the morning like it's supposed to? If it doesn't, that's a failure. And that's what they measure. They don't measure how long it sits on the truck and how long it sits in the airplane and how long it sits at the sorting site. That's irrelevant. Those are all input measurements. They're measuring, did we get it to the customer by our promised time? We should be doing the same, but our processes don't support that. Another one is, we don't measure and track client results, but rather all those internal metrics. Do we know how much we've helped our clients or our customers grow their business or enhance the value of their business, or how much taxes we've saved them, or how much better we do with their cash flow? In other words, what's the impact of our work on our customers? Yeah, it's difficult to measure. It's not as easy as measuring how many hours we put into something. That's easy. That's why we measure it, because it's easy. But that doesn't make it meaningful or relevant. So I think we need to look at results, outcomes to the customer, and track those as best we can, because it's a better focus for us. We're not good with scope creep. There's a question in here somewhere about, I undervalued my fixed price agreement and it blew up, the job blew up on me, and how am I going to approach the customer? Well, part of that is because you probably didn't anticipate scope creep enough. You didn't anticipate that things would change in the engagement. Now, there's several causes of that. One, we don't spend enough time doing diagnosis. I swear, if bookkeepers and accountants were doctors and somebody walked in and said, I think I need a triple bypass. Okay, hop up on the table. We'll take care of you. No. They're going to go through a battery of tests. They're going to spend a lot of time diagnosing. In our world, that means we're going to go into your QuickBooks file and we're going to poke around, and we might spend a day or two. Now, we may or may not charge you for it. And a lot of bookkeepers do charge for that because they turn out a pretty good, valuable informational report back to the customer. But irrespective of whether you charge for that or not, to me, that's part of our professional duty, to know what we're getting into. When I hear people say, I got into this customer and they were a complete mess, I have zero sympathy. That's their fault. That's like a surgeon cutting you open and saying, well, you're just a mess. No. That's your fault for not doing an MRI, a CAT scan, and everything else that you had to do before you cut the person open. That's our responsibility. The patient understands the symptoms, but the doctor understands the cause of the disease. And we're the professional. We have to take the time to diagnose. So that's a big part of why we don't catch scope creep. We don't use the change request, change order policy like auto mechanics or contractors do. Everyone on this call would be upset if you took your car to a shop and they said, oh, you need a tune-up, it'll be $300. And then you get back to the shop after a long day at work and they say, oh, Ron, we found that your brakes were messed up. It didn't balance. So we just fixed them. So the bill's not $400 or $300, it's $700. We'd go ballistic. We want them to call us and say, hey, your brakes are shot. What should we do? That gives me the power to make a decision as a customer. We just go ahead and plow through the work without ever talking to the customer. That's a huge mistake. Yeah. Psychologically, from a decision standpoint, from a pricing standpoint, it's just a huge mistake. And so we're not good at scope creep because we've never had to deal with it. We just bill by the hour. Whatever it takes, that's the bill. Scope creep never mattered before. It matters in this model. There's also scope C. This is when we add value that the customer doesn't ask for. We go in, we do the tune-up, but we put in, platinum headed valves or whatever, or replace another part, but we never charge for it because we think, well, we got to get it up to standards or quality standards, or it's got to be just perfect. We spend a week looking for $100 error in inventory or something. Now, a lot of that stuff may or may not be valuable, but scope seat by definition is the customer would value it, but we never told them about it. let alone charged them for it. And I actually think scope seep can be a bigger problem than scope creep. I know that sounds very counterintuitive, but that's been my experience. We do a lot of things for our customers that we don't even think about. We're like fish in water. We never think about the water, but the customer thinks it's magic, and yet we don't charge for it, which is a big problem. The other thing is we're not really good project managers. And the reason for that is we use timesheets. Timesheets are historical. By the time I see something on a timesheet, it is by definition no longer manageable. To use your timesheet to run your firm is like timing your cookies with your smoke alarm. Right? I mean, by the time you see it on a timesheet, you're crying over spilt milk. It's too late at that point. And no, you don't learn from it, and no, you don't get better because of the timesheet. There's other systems and processes that will help you do that. Project management is all about forecasting capacity into the future. In other words, I don't mind if you project time into the future. I don't mind if I said to you, Katrina, here, I'm going to give you this project. I think it should take about 8 hours, right? And then we put in the system that, you're blocked for this 8 hours, whether that's today, tomorrow, whenever you want to block yourself for that 8 hours. But what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to fetishize over the idea that you spent 12 hours on it and we were $4 or 4 hours off of budget, right? We've got this accounting mindset that we have to compare, projected to actual for everything. And it just doesn't work that way in project management. If you spent 12 hours on it, you know what? Close enough. What I'm more concerned about is why didn't it go back to the customer by the due date that we promised them? In other words, why would something sit in the firm that we projected would take about 8 hours for you to do, but it sat in the firm for 3 weeks? That's the bottleneck. That's what I should be concerned about. But no, I'm concerned about, well, when you finally did do it, weeks late, well, you spent 4 hours more than we thought. So what? It sat in the firm for 3 hours. Where's the bottleneck? And like most bottlenecks, it's at the top of the bottle. It's the partners. They didn't do the review quick enough, or, so somebody needed more information from the customer, whatever it is. So we're not good project managers because of the timesheet and the billable hour. We've never had to do proper project management, which is all about forecasting into the future. The other thing is we've never had to develop pricing talent before. This is a new skill for us inside of the professional world. And we're getting better at it. We've actually started to hire professional pricers. And yes, there is such a thing. You'll read about it in the book. There's professional. I can get a PhD in pricing. I can get a master's. I can get an MBA in some schools in pricing. This has become a discipline. It's become a profession. And these are people who live and breathe pricing, and firms are starting to hire them. Now, these are some of the bigger firms, but I think there's pricing talent in every firm, but you've got to develop it. You've got to constantly learn, like read books and go to webinars or seminars, whatever, look around and see how other industries price, because there's a lot to learn from what other industries are doing. And that's a new skill to put on our radar screen. So I think we're still kind of struggling with that, getting our feet wet. And then there's this debate over, do we start with new customers or current customers? And I'm actually agnostic on this question. When I started making this change in my own firm in 1989, I had very simple logic. I was a dummy. I didn't do anything right, but I just knew that value pricing, or what I called fixed pricing back then, was the right thing to do from a customer experience standpoint. And I thought to myself, well, I already have a good relationship with my current customers. Why wouldn't I start there? Why wouldn't I start there? They hate the billable hour. They complain to me about it when we're out at lunch or whatever. Why wouldn't I sit down with them? Well, it's really easy, I think, to do both. Yeah, you put all new customers that come in on this method, but at the same time, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. You slowly convert one customer at a time, your current customers over to fixed pricing. And so I started with my current customers, and I've seen it work both ways. A lot of bookkeepers have started with current customers. A lot of bookkeepers have started with new customers, built their confidence up, and then went back to their current customers to convert them. It is a little bit more challenging to convert a current customer. I think there's a question along those lines than it is a new customer. But you got to get skilled at this, because you've got to be able to convert your existing customers. Otherwise, you'll never get a majority of your revenue under value pricing. You'll just get the new stuff under value pricing. But most of our revenue comes from our current customers, unless we're getting new customers every year, which doesn't happen in our world as much. And then I think unlearning, and I've studied this quite a bit. It's really hard to unlearn something, to give up your prior biases, to give up your view of the world. Old habits die hard. That's really true. Before you can do something new, you have to give up something. Rock climbers, I think, have a saying: before you can, go to a new place in the climb, you have to give up where you are, right? To move forward, you have to leave some things behind. And unlearning is a real challenge. It's not something that we do automatically. We have to work at it to challenge our beliefs. And maybe that's why this book is so big, because I wrote it as a way to challenge my own beliefs. I used to hold the beliefs of the billable hour and the timesheet and the cost accounting view of the world. This book is my repudiation of all that. And you have to wrestle with that. And that it's not a sudden bolt of lightning that drops from the sky and hits you and converts you. It's a slow, gradual, messy changing of the mind. But it's all that process of unlearning that's so important. And then here's a big one. How do you get people who are bad at pricing inside the firm to stop doing it? Just to take that authority away from them and say, you know what? You're lousy at this and you shouldn't do it anymore. I mean, if I was a lousy tax preparer, you wouldn't let me touch tax returns. But somehow firms think when you get to be the owner or the partner, just because you're in that exalted role, you're going to be an expert pricer. And a lot of times that's not true. I'll tell you, the best pricers in the firm are usually the team members, because they're at the coalface, they're doing the work, and they're going to be really bold. They don't want to give themselves away. The owner's willing to give themselves away usually, or even better, and I'm not being sarcastic here, even better, you know who should do your pricing? Your spouse. Because your spouse has to live with the consequences of you underpricing and over-servicing your customers, the missed meals, the late nights, the missed, footy games and all of that. But by the way, I'm a huge AFL fan. I think that's just such a cool sport. But go Cats, right? My Australian buddy is a huge Cats fan. I've been to so many Cats games as I've visited down there. I just love it. It's a blast. And so anyway, I know I've been rambling. I know there's a lot there. The last one is pricing is complex jobs. When we're confronted with the complex job, maybe it's a huge mess cleanup. Maybe it's got several layers to it, and you're going to have to peel the onion to do all the things you have to do to get the customer on the right track. We look at that, and because it's so filled with risk and uncertainty, we say, there's no way I can put a fixed price on this. I'm just going to do this by the hour. Well, I'm here to tell you, it's precisely those jobs that have the most value, where you need to run away from the billable hour the quickest, because a job that has risk and uncertainty in it has got profit written all over it. It's got windfall profits written all over it, because it probably means it's really valuable to the customer if there's an element of risk and uncertainty to it. And by providing them a fixed price and giving them certainty, you can capture some of that extra value that you're creating from taking that uncertain world and bringing order to it and conveying certainty to them. So I know that's a lot, it's 14 points, but those are some of the biggest challenges we see. And I'll shut up and let you guys comment on that or ask more questions around it or whatever.